All right, yesterday we learned the first of the Mishnayot, which is in Pirki Avot, the chapters of the fathers, And we learned that the Torah was given by God to Moses. He gave it to Joshua. Exactly, the whole Torah he gave to Joshua, and with all the explanations. Joshua gave it to what's called the elders. Those were what's called the judges for the first 440, something like that, years that the Jews were in Israel. That's the judges. And the judges, they gave it to the prophets. And the prophets, they gave it to the men of the Great Assembly. That's in the beginning of the Second Temple. That was like Ezra HaSofer and Daniel and Mordechai, the star of the Megillah of Esther. And the prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, the last three prophets, they were part of this also. According to some opinions, there was 80 people, there was 200 people in the Great Assembly. They lasted for about 200 years. And the men of the Great Assembly, they left three very important messages for the continuation of the Torah learning in the world. Now, you have to remember, the Torah is not just the book of the Jews. It's not just here to benefit Judaism and to show that our religion is better than all the other religions, and our religion is the most practical and etc., the wisest and the most genuine and the most provable of all the religions, which all that stuff is true. That certainly is true. But the purpose of the Torah is to bring blessing to the whole entire world. And that's why it's so tremendously important that the Torah has to be passed down in an accurate way. So therefore, they said three things. First of all, when you judge people according to the Torah, if there are any judgments, any court cases, because the Torah are laws. So you have to be, first of all, very patient in judging people, and you have to go through all of your knowledge in order not to miss anything when you are making a judgment. Number two, you have to not be alone. You have to try to make as many pupils as you can. Don't think, that future generations, I want them to remember me, that I'm the greatest. No, give your knowledge, distribute your knowledge freely to others. That's what Moses did. And finally, make a fence for the Torah, the generations, the ensuing generations, as they get further and further from the experience of the giving of the Torah, less and less do people connect the Torah with God. And therefore, you have to make fences around the Torah. The rabbis are commanded to make fences around the Torah. Here we have a lot of different explanations of what they are, but let's go further. Here we go. One minute. Here we go. Let's try it. Ready? Yes. Second Mishnah. Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik was the last of these people which were in the Great Assembly. Now, the men of the Great Assembly, they're the ones who made the order of our prayers, our daily prayers, and what's called the Shmona Esrei, the what's called the standing prayer. Shimon HaTzadik, he was remained the last of this Great Assembly. By the way, one of the reasons why they're called Great Assembly was because they made God great. And when the temple was destroyed, this was a tremendous blow to Judaism and to the Jewish people. They thought that God has left us, and rightly so. I mean, God destroyed the whole temple. The Jewish people were evicted from the land of Israel. It seemed that God had sort of, given up on the Jewish people, just reneged on the whole thing. So they said, well, we can't call God great anymore. We are not representatives. God doesn't want us to represent him anymore. God is not great. So they came back and they said, no. The people of the Great Assembly said, no. Here the Jewish people were surrounded by all our enemies. Everyone wants to kill us. And even with the Jewish people within themselves, they want to do everything they can to destroy us. And nevertheless, here we are. We're still, that's the greatness of God. One sheep surrounded by 70 wolves, and there's also these wolves with their inside also. And the sheep continues to exist. That's pretty miraculous. So they brought back the greatness of God, so to speak. So the Jews could say proudly that we are here to make God great. So they said, on three things the world stands: on Torah, on Avoda, and Gemilat Chasadim. Torah means the Torah, learning the Torah. Avoda means prayer. In the time of the temple, prayer was also accompanied by the sacrifices. Nowadays, we don't have the sacrifices, so we, so to speak, have the sacrifices, because the word sacrifice in Hebrew is korban, to come close. So we have to come close to God. So that's the avoda that was in the time of the temple, was the sacrifice. The sacrifices were not just done coldly. The sacrifices were only there to help the Jews pray. The Jews attached their hearts to God. That's what the sacrifices were. It wasn't you could do a sin and you could, you brought an animal, so you brought 5 animals. You could, pay up front, and then you can just go home and do 5 cents. The animals were just, it was a commandment from God to do, the animals brought, but the main thing was to arouse the heart back then. And now it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because we don't have the temple, we want it back again. And so nevertheless, on the Torah, avoda, serving God, and it was giving to God, that's prayer, and gemilat chasadim, and acts of kindness. And let's look at one of these explanations over here. What are these 3 things? Torah, prayer, and kindness. A lot of times this is explained that Torah is like the middle pillar. The Torah contains everything. What's permissible, what's forbidden, it's strict, it's lenient. Torah. What you should do, what you shouldn't do. Avoda, that's strict. That's like fire going up. When you serve, pray, you're supposed to be like one of the sacrifices, fire. And Gemilat Chasadim, that's kindness. That's like water coming down. So it's chesed, gevura, and tiferet. Tiferet is the Torah. Let's look at the Bar Tanura. Ready? Rav Ovadia of Bar Tanura. What do we say? What happened over here? Shimon HaTzadik, anyway, he was the last one. He was, after all of them died, that was him. That remained, all the teachings were remained in the hands of Shimon HaTzadik. That was his name. And he was Shimon HaTzadik, he was the high priest, Kohen Gadol, after Ezra. Ezra was also a priest, high priest. This was like I say, about 200 years in to the Second Temple. The Second Temple stood for 420 years. So right about in the middle, that's when Shimon HaTzadik lived. He would say, he was always accustomed to say, there's 3 things that the world stands on. Lo nivra olam, the world was not created except for these 3 things. Torah. If it was not for Torah, if the Jews didn't receive the Torah, it says there wouldn't be heavens in the earth. Like it says, Im lo briti, it's a pasuk from Jeremiah. If it wasn't for my brit, for my Torah, the heavens and the earth, the day and night, and the laws of heaven and earth, the laws of nature, I wouldn't have made. The whole thing was created for the sake of the Torah. Because what good is the world? It's like a person that has, wins $100 million and he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know the same thing. We have this world. We don't know what to do with the world. What we're supposed to do. So the Torah tells us what to do with the world. If it wasn't for the Torah, then the world is just bedlam, just complete confusion. Next, al-avoda. Avoda, this means the service of the sacrifices. That's what we see in the Gemara in Tainas, that if it wasn't for the prayers that the Jews made in the Holy Temple and the sacrifices that they made there, as the heaven and the earth also wouldn't have been created. So the world was created for Torah and also for the service that was done in the temple. We also find that because of the sacrifices that Noah made, that God commanded that he would not make any more a flood in the world. So we see that the world exists because of the sacrifices. And like I said, now we don't have the sacrifices, we have prayer. And Gemilat Chasadim, because of acts of kindness, like it says, Olam Chesed Yiboneh, sentence in Psalms. The world is created from love, God's kindness. By God giving kindness, this means to make, in weddings, to make the bride and the groom rejoice, to comfort people that are in mourning, to visit people that are sick, to bury the dead, give charity, and simply to support the poor people, and etc. Similar things. Like that's one of the explanations of Rabbi Avadia of Bar Tanura. Good. We learned a Mishnah today about the Anshe Knesset Gedolah that said that the world stands on the Torah, on prayer, and on good deeds. Have a good day with Mashiach. Now, God willing, tomorrow, 8:15, we'll continue learning the Likkutei Torah. Likkutei Torah about the angels saying, holy, holy, holy. And we'll learn from the Dvar Malchut about the qualities that we have to adapt in order to accept Mashiach and to bring the future redemption, benefit the whole entire world. Tune in tomorrow. Have a good day with Mashiach now.